get this wrong, the Office of the Assistant Director of Science and Technology.
That's correct.
Great. So what we're hoping to do is that we'll use the first half hour of the meeting or so, might go over a little bit, asking questions of Eric and Katanya and hearing about their experience. And then we will launch into questions. If you do have questions, you are automatically muted. Right. So if you have any questions, you can ask them on the GoToWebinar, and we'll keep an eye on that, and we can bring those up to the presenters. Or you can also raise your hand next to your name there. There's a hand raise, and we'll keep an eye on that as well, and we can call on you and unmute you so that you can ask the question yourself if you would prefer. So let's get started. Eric, if you could tell us a short history of your program, you know, a little bit about how long you've been building it, how long personally you've been working on it, et cetera, that would be great.
Sure. So I think we've been doing open data for just a little over 3 years now. And really, the way it began is we had a huge data evangelist. She was really wonderful, and she was kind of fulfilling the role of like an open data coordinator. And she was actually working out of the Water Services Department for a little while. And she did a really nice job kind of going around the organization and getting that low-hanging fruit data, but also the extremely valuable data. So data like our 311 call center service requests, and data like our police data of like where crimes occurred and that sort of thing. So the stuff we knew we had good data on and that it was going to be easy to publish, she went ahead and took care of that. And that really built out a strong base. Then there was a transition. She took a job with another company. And so we kind of switched to a more strategic approach. We moved open data into the city manager's office of performance management because we had been finding that the data was extremely useful for performance management reasons and for staff having access to it. So it made sense, since we were kind of a huge customer, to just move it into our shop. And since then, we've also formed a data governance committee, begun data inventory processes, and are also working on data prioritization of what do we release and at what level. And really the goal that we're kind of working on right now is leveraging open data to really push data skills and an open data mindset into the departments. And that is really kind of work through the data governance committee that we've started.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Sure. And I guess we'll sort of go like a back and forth between the two speakers. Katanya, I guess sort of similar question. Can you go ahead and tell us a little history of sort of your program at ATF, like a brief history, how it got started, how long you've
that we started initially in a very small way back in 2012. And what it is that ATF already presents data out on our website for atf.gov from one of the program areas, and it's called our trace data. And it is presented in a PDF format. So by the department and by my CIO's office, you know, we were able to take the data that was presented there and then bring it in and ingest it into our open data initiative. And that allowed us to then begin to create different presentations of the data. Well, as we're moving this forward, I'm now being able to capture, I think we're up to 7 other different data set areas that we have out there beyond what is our trace data. And so we are trying to take any one of our organizations that already present on the atf.gov site, so any data that is publicly available, using that to bring it in, and in the different areas that we have, so firearms, alcohol-related, tobacco-related, you know, those types of areas that we have, those initiatives. So the goal for the Bureau is to look at it and see what is the easiest way for us to be able to put data out to the public for them to be able to review, and there are researchers or analysts that are out there that would use this data and, again, make it a lot more easily accessible. There's another initiative that we have out there. It's called Fire Toss. That's fire research. So those are going to be some of the other initiatives that we have going forward, except Fire Toss by itself, it presents a lot of challenges. So we're having to go slow about that. Well, because it was just put data out there that was already available, we're also going to be looking at what are some other areas where data can be made available. Well, in that process, what we're trying to do now is develop up some concepts of operations so that we know that when it's being presented. So, for example, if there are any FOIA, privacy types of information that's in some of the data, well, it's got to be purged before it can be made publicly available. So, and then once we start placing the data out there, there's going to be a very structured review process to ensure that we're just a platform. I'm the CIO's office. That's all we are, is a platform for our customers. So we have to make sure that they, from the program areas of assembling the data to their management structure and making sure between the two, those are talking and everybody is in agreement that the data needs to be presented and in the format in which it's being presented.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So Eric, can you talk a little bit about the evaluation you do of your program, how often you are evaluating the program, and if you have a process for that, a little description? You might be on mute, Eric.
Sorry, our city has a process called the Citywide Business Plan that outlines what the City Council wants. Then there's department plans that are a little bit more strategic, or a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for, active, or you can use them to actually get your work done. And then there's division plans, which really outline what work is being done and what we're trying to accomplish. So Open Data, like all other programs, has a business plan, and it's something we revisit once a year, and that kind of gives us a chance to sit down and set goals for the next year. But really, when it comes to evaluation, we're always trying new things and looking at the data. So our goal is always to provide the most useful data possible. We don't track things like number of data sets or number of times people have built apps with it, or number of times it's been mentioned in the media. We're primarily focused on number of sessions that we have on the site, and we do that by using Google Analytics. I actually didn't know we had been running Google Analytics on the site since launch. I just came into this role about 6 months ago and found out that we had this rich data source that had been running for quite a while now. And so we've been really mining that for a lot of insights, and it's something that I look at just about every day, because it allows us to look at long-term trends, but it also allows us to see if what we're doing is working. So, for example, because we're so focused on increasing the number of sessions and increasing the number of people who are finding the data useful, we had an opportunity to put some media around our budget announcement. And a large part of our budget this year is knocking down dangerous buildings throughout the community. I think we're planning to knock down all 850 of them or so. So this is a big deal for us. And we made sure to pair all the media releases with open data around dangerous buildings, including just the raw data, but also maps and heat maps that we had made using the data platform that people could access, as well as the data lens. And what we found is that it was enormously successful for us. And within 3 or 4 days, we had driven 2,500 different people just to those specific links that were sent out. And it also let us track which channels were working, so we could tell how many people were doing it via Twitter, how many people clicked on via Facebook. But what we were really able to tell is which of our media sources in the community, which of our news stations were using the data and users clicking through. And that was really informative for us. Point that I probably need to go out and start talking to some of these news stations and helping them use open data and understanding how to embed things and stuff like that, because it was such a success. So really, we use Google Analytics just about every day to evaluate our process.
That's awesome. And so, Eric, what obstacles have you really faced as you've matured your program? And, how do you handle any departments or agencies that kind of remain skeptical of the work you're doing?
So I think the primary obstacle is that we ran out of easy, clean data that was readily available. Everything we do now requires some sort of cleanup and a lot of trust building before we can put it up on open data. And that's part of why we've started the whole kind of data governance process is all the easy stuff is gone. For us, when it comes to handling our skeptics, we have really, really good executive buy-in. When the mayor was elected, he wanted open data. The city council has been incredibly supportive through 2 different councils at this point. And our department heads are also coming on board, and we're starting to work with them, and they have a say in kind of our process of, is this okay to publish at this point? And they can go back to their staff and talk about it. And in some cases, even we're starting to get calls from division heads and working with them directly. Either they want to publish more data, but they're not sure how, or we're working with them to find out what data they have and what they would be comfortable sharing at this point. A really large tool for us has honestly been, we passed our 3rd revamp of our open data ordinance about 2 months ago. And I'm not typically someone who rolls out like, oh, you have an ordinance, but show me what you're really doing. But the ordinance was specific enough to call out that a data inventory be created for each department, and each department assigns someone who reports to the data governance committee. And it spelled out some of those structures for us. And that having those ordinances is motivational for a large part of our workforce. So I can go to a department director and get movement because of that. Otherwise, though, it's just you keep chipping away at those departments or groups that are not quite on board yet. And you change the culture. For us, what's been kind of a nice trick is we're doing a much, much better job of linking performance to budgets. So if you want to talk about your performance, you have to have data. And chances are, if you don't already have data, you need someone who can kind of help you understand it. So we work as consultants on that, and that helps because we're the Office of Performance Management. But we're also going to kind of discover your data that way, and our process is just built in that we're going to make it open unless there's a really good reason not to. So it's all kind of built into our process, and I think we're at the point now where department directors, division directors realize they need to have data to support their budget requests. If they don't, they're not really going to get them. And so therefore, there is kind of an initiative on the part of every department to start working with data and to start, collaborating together. And they all need each other's data to get what they need done, which, of course, open data is kind of the answer to for us.
Right. That's great. Thanks.
Katanya, sort of similar questions in terms of obstacles that you or your team have sort of faced as you've begun developing the program, and then also sort of in the sort of initial phases when you were, talking to, like you said, the trace data teams, the FireToss teams. Were there any program areas that were either skeptical or sort of a little bit hesitant, and were you able to sort of work with them to sort of come around and sort of show them any sort of benefits from joining the Open ATF platform?
Well, the answer is yes. So we've had our challenges with our program areas, and the one particular one, so the trace data, the bigger issue that they actually have is the fact that when we put the data out there in the original format that we had, we were able to create the charts and the graphs of views, because you, John Doe, Joe Public, can take and create your own presentation and combining data that's not normally put together, that has created a problem for us. And with that, it's because you may be doing a comparison that the Bureau is not necessarily in agreement, and all of a sudden it shows up in your presentation, our data, but it shows up in your presentation someplace out in the public arena. Well, I have to control that portion of it. So one of the things that we're looking at right now, and I'm loving them, are the stories, is that the Bureau can write their own story. So I am now putting together a package and going back, because over time I've actually had changes in personnel. So when I explain it to one, they get it, they understand, we can move forward, then the new person comes. Well, I have, an agency full of agents who are skeptical about, why we're putting information out first, why we, put it out this way and things like that. Well, now I can show them a process that says you can write the story, you can put it in the format that you want, you can put the graphs together and the data together that you want to be able to display that tells our story. And oh, by the way, they can't change it. And that is one of the pieces I think that's going to be able to sell it back to them again, because every change in their management structure is, new skeptics that I got to go back and repeat the same story. So that is one of the pieces that I have. I've got others who are not skeptical, but they have a challenge, and is the fact that, and I'll use FireToss. FireToss presents unstructured data, which is a problem, but yet I can still use the open data portal for it because I can still present something. So because it's fire research, there is a view that is used by fire research analysts inside of our organization and outside in the public arena that's more information than just regular public needs to have. But I'll give you an example. There was in the DC area fire last Christmas time where a Christmas tree caught on fire. Well, they actually will do some analysis about it, and it says, well, how long did it take for it to burn, what caused it, and those types of things, and then begin to put it out there. And we're looking at that says, what does the public need to know about these types of occurrences, fires, and what causes them, how to prevent them? Well, we can put reports with it, we can put videos, and we can put pictures. Well, when I go back to my customer and say, okay, give me this information and give it to me this way, now I have a different problem, which is my pictures and my video contain personnel within the organization. Oh, can't use those. So I now have to find another tool to be able to purge the data. So the data is available, but now I've got to clean it. And those are some of the obstacles that we continue to face. And each new data set that I bring forward, there is always going to be something that we have to, because it's not going to be like the last one. So each new data set that we have in each program area that we have, the data is going to come to me. It's going to come in almost a raw format. And the program area says, I want to present it. Okay. And then when we start digging through it, we find, oh, wait a minute, this isn't something that we used before. My commerce data, love it. My federal firearms licensing, love it, because it's just straight data. They don't have any particular issues with it, and then they can present. And, when we have those easy wins, we use those. And so that's one of the things. And so some of my areas, I post data, but I have to put them on hold until we can find a different way behind the scenes to be able to fix those issues that they have. My FOIA, they are involved in the FireToss one. That's why we know that we can't post some of our pictures. Well, they're looking at it and they're working with us to solve one problem, but then they went, hey, wait a minute, we can use this. So it presents now another opportunity for us. So I get a loss, I get a win, and I go back and forth on that, that conundrum that says, okay, while we're working on one problem, somebody else presents another opportunity. And we're trying to grow with it, but given limited resources, I can only work so fast. And, and having the system, be able to handle it as well.
I think that's great. Thank you.
So, Eric, what roles or skill sets do you have on your team that you've found to be most important as you've matured your program?
So I think soft skill sets are actually incredibly important and often overlooked at the beginning of an open data program. And I think to have someone who's really passionate about it and believes in open data is really key to it. Otherwise, it's just another job duty. Certainly something for me that I can come in and get excited about every day is good for the program. And the people we work with in departments, the ones who are excited about it and see it as an opportunity to do something really cool with government, that produces really excellent results. So having the ability to kind of manage it in that way and communicate that level of excitement and keep the energy up around the program is really great. At the same time, I think it's important to develop kind of a gritty attitude and keep your eyes on the long distance vision for the program, your long distance goals, where you're going, because where we're at right now, it's hard to get new data up. It's not as fun as it was when we were publishing a new data set every month that brought major value. We're continually having to try new things. We're continually hitting roadblocks. Nothing's as quick as it used to be. And that just kind of comes with maturity. For example, when we first launched, we weren't really touching any sensitive data that couldn't possibly be released. But now, because we're starting to look at these data sets, we need to run everything through the law department first. So that, you start to introduce a few areas of bureaucracy, and to have that grit and just that determination to keep pushing things through is really important. On the technical side, I wouldn't say it was super important to have really great technical skills at the beginning of our open data platform, but it's become much more important now. And for us, we're really lucky because we have someone who understands our GIS data and our GIS systems extremely well. And that's kind of a wealth of knowledge we can continue to tap. I have a counterpart in IT who is just incredible, and she does a ton of work with our databases and playing with queries and getting the data out into the shapes we need. She's really wonderful there, and that allows me to kind of focus on data strategy, working with people, and working with the community. And one of I think the really beneficial aspects we have is, we have people who can get the data out, but since our office is really looking to use this data to push the city forward, and we also work closely with Code for America so we can ask them about this, we make sure to get feedback on it and let them know, like, well, can you add these variables to the data? That would help us really sort it out. Or can you split this variable out into a couple different views or things like that you can build into the data set ahead of time to just make it much more useful. So those technical skills have become more important, especially as our data gets larger. About a year ago, we noticed that some of our larger data sets were going to start breaking Microsoft Excel, which doesn't do so well over 1 million rows. And so, we've invested resources into learning R and learning Pentaho, and that hasn't been easy, but now we have the confidence that we can continue to work with this data and continue to understand this data as it gets larger.
Great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Katanya, sort of similar question in terms of roles or skill sets that are important to have on your team as you developed, and also you mentioned, part of the sort of team's focus evolving as the program evolves. I guess you had mentioned using stories or perspectives to tell the data story a little bit more, but sort of either speak more of that or sort of any other team focus that evolves with the data program.
Okay. So right now it started out with a program of one, myself, and then with Socrata bringing them in and helping us take the initiative forward. But we're still a small group of people that facilitate the administration of the site itself and trying to get it up and taking the picture of it and making it more in line with my public affairs office and saying, okay, this is the presentation that they want, and it should look similar to. We don't want it to be, there's a drastic difference between, our site and what my PGA office is putting out there and saying this is the face of ATF. We want to make it seamless. So I'm having to work in conjunction with our public affairs office and making sure that all lines up. Well, then I have my subject matter experts. Well, I now have to keep them in their own particular groups because they all have a different purpose. Even if they're using the same vehicle, they still have a different purpose and a mission of what it is that they're trying to put out there. Who are they trying to reach? Well, that's my program area. So those are my subject matter experts there. Well, then the next group that we've actually started to try to engage in is the public itself. Who are the people that are actually trying to use our site? So one of the initiatives that we actually had held last year was what we call Industry Day. Industry allowed me to take my different program areas, invite the public out into the organization, and we hosted them here. Each program area had their own session, and where we could engage with them and says, okay, if we're putting this data out here, what are you using it for? Because a lot of times, the government is one of the things that we do is we post data and go, okay, somebody said I had there was a FOIA request. They said we have to post it. Okay, now it's posted. Okay. And then no one else knows what happens to it after that. Well, we wanted to know in order to be able to use the site to make it more useful for the public who's our audience, who is our true audience on it. And they could be any one of the industries that we had out there. And so we actually think that we had, for instance, it was this first session, we had great participation. There are those who then want to come back and engage further. So I know eventually I will probably want to start up like a user community that says if you have, suggestions or ideas or things that we're not posting yet but you want to see. Addition, as I mentioned earlier, my FOIA office said, if somebody in the public, if something's going on in the public, whether it's a fire, whether it is something where there is a mass, literally mass shootings, or, any other area in which we're involved in, if there are 3 FOIA requests, then maybe we want to take and use the site to put it out there. And so our group, although it started out small, it's growing, and we want to be able to engage. And so I have a central group, and then we in turn address each of the other different program areas, and I'm watching this thing expand, and just trying to keep my hands on it. I know eventually, from a program office perspective, my organization is going to have to look at it and see, are we staffed to be able to handle that in order for this to truly evolve. Well, I then also leverage the resources that are up at the department, because the department has to respond, to the overall initiative and requirements. And they did even participate in our industry day to be able to, say, hey, what is DOJ's perspective? Where do they want to go with this? And, then do a comparison. Are we in line with what DOJ is putting out there?
Great.
Really cool. I attended the industry day, and it was actually really interesting, especially seeing sort of the different perspectives from the different data owners and sort of seeing the different offerings. So definitely a big fan of that one myself.
Oh, thank you.
Great. So Eric, if you could go back to, Eric on your first day and redo one thing, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
I wouldn't necessarily change how we started out. I think our former open data coordinator read the situation right and knew that trying to start a big top-down data governance approach would have killed off any excitement for the program. And I think she did the absolute right thing by, working around the bureaucracy. I would, however, focus on automating data sets from the beginning. We had a lot of data sets that were being manually updated, and that just became such a weight on us. And it's taking a lot of time to go back and automate those and then take it off of us. So just focusing on the data sets you could automate from the first place, and almost to the point of if it can't be automated, maybe it's not a priority right now. And then I would have also, I wish we'd done a better job with metadata and building in standards around before data sets released, that each column has a good descriptor, that all the information is filled out in the metadata field so that people understand it. And like the other speaker was saying, the stories platform, we're excited about that as a way to kind of show, walks people through the data on a data set by data set basis so that they understand it. Obviously that takes a lot of time and we'll never have it perfect, but I think if we started over, focusing on metadata would have been really helpful.
Yeah. Those are great points, and I think others feel the same way. So that's great.
Yep. Katanya, I guess sort of same question. Sort of if you could go back to day one and sort of with the knowledge you have now, what would you change? Would you do anything differently? How would you handle?
Well, there are some things that I would. And if I'm hearing the other speaker, it's like they're actually in the program area and they're relying on working with IT. I'm in the IT shop. So the problem I think that I faced in the very beginning is that here is an initiative that arose up out of the IT department that says, hey, this is a nice new way to present. And because of that, I think the program areas were a little bit more skeptical about it. And I'll tell you, my first customer that I had to work with, they didn't want to do it at all. And I am this, I don't know, how do you want to call it? I'm a persistent one. And so I think giving it to me, my boss knew what was going to happen is it was going to get done. Well, in that, it's not always a nice and warm and cuddly kind of fashion of moving it forward. I was able to obtain the data just like anybody else can, which is from the public site. It was a little bit harder for me to then do the conversion, which is what the public would have to go through. And now, you know, the customer, they got it. Once we went through the pain of putting it up there, now the data is put there, you know, on a regular basis, and it's provided to us in an automated fashion. Well, I had to, you know, that's pulling teeth kind of a way. So that's not an easy way to approach this. I think that if I had a customer who was willing, which my second set of customers were, I think they were like customer number 2 and number 3, they were more than willing to come in. They saw the value added on it. If I started with them, then I would have been able to make, you know, leaps and bounds of moving this forward, and I would have had some easier wins. And what I'm having to do now is take that customer, move them forward. It's a lot easier, and then go back to the first one and go, okay, so we'll see what we did with the last one. You know, you're my first. You could have been, you know, much further ahead than you are of how the data is presented. So it was very challenging, and it actually took me almost a year in that first group when I was able to put up so many data sets with group 2 and 3 in a couple of months. It took me a year to deal with the politics of it on that first group. So it would have been a lot easier if we had started with a willing partner.
Yeah,
Totally.
great. So we'd like to open it up to questions at this point to the group. If you guys have any questions, you can either raise your hand on you know, the GoToWebinar, or type the questions in and we can ask them. And then hopefully we can go from there and start some discussion.
It looks like I've seen a question. Katanya, this one's for you. You had mentioned sort of there's the some programs will sort of have the more raw data, and then also other programs will sort of have the more full story or perspective to sort of give context to the data. I guess, do you see there sort of being a balance between, you know, providing just straight up raw data so that the numbers are there, and then also being able to provide the more, like you said, you know, John Q. public friendly story? Or do you sort of see more of a focus on the story, or I guess how do you sort of see that for the long run for ATF?
I see a mix. I think that there is some data that's better presented straight in a story. The fire toss is a great candidate for it, and the trace data is a requirement for it. However, because the stories actually have the ability to be able to present a chart or a graph in it, as time goes on, I can see us then maybe opening up the raw data portion of it so that, you know, it can be viewed. But I got to go small. I got to start small on what it is that is being presented out there. But the rest of my data, with the firearm side of it and things to that effect, they are fine. They're great candidates for it. My commerce data. So I will have a mix of the data being presented out here in the formats. We're trying to fully utilize it. Says the data itself, what presentation is best for it. It's not the same for each one.
Cool, and I think that's a really good point you made. You know, sort of not just sort of assuming there is the one. We'll get the data out to the people. Dust your hands, it's out there. But sort of figuring out based on the context of the data what is best and what serves the best purpose. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then I have a question here for you, Eric. How are you, and is it in your department or working with another department to promote your data program either internally or externally?
Yeah, so that's definitely something we've been trying to do more and more. Externally, I work with Code for America locally on the brigade. I'm one of their core team members, And we definitely, that's its own organic thing, and we're very conscious of the local government not to push. I'm there to listen and help projects that want to use open data, or maybe let them know, like, hey, that data set's not so great, why don't you use this other one? And so really working through Code for America has been rewarding for us in kind of building that audience of technical users who are going to be hitting things via API and asking really good questions about what exactly does this one variable in this one data set mean. I'd say the larger benefit of that relationship has actually been the feedback from them on how to improve our operations. And because it's kind of an ongoing, continual thing, it's become really fun. And, you know, we just communicate via Slack pretty much all day long, every day. So there's really no barrier to entry between the city and them, and I think they really enjoy that partnership. Internally, we have, you know, of course, an internal intranet site that we publish stories on regularly about how we're using data or how people can help use the open data platform. Right now we're hiring a trainer position who's going to train a multitude of things throughout the city. But one of those will be to help people understand the open data platform. They can use it for their job. So we'll build out those modules, as well as finding people in each department who are interested in this sort of work and giving them the opportunity and empowering them to start to do this sort of thing using open data. And then building more of the external audience that's not necessarily technically focused, but just the general public. We have a city stat program that's kind of like what Baltimore Stat used to be. And it's basically once a month we sit down, we do a live presentation with a slide deck with a panel of experts, and we look at data with the mayor and the city manager, and it's tweeted out, it's streamed, et cetera. And during that, we're finding a lot of success by I'll be in the background tweeting out the raw data as we go. We're tweeting out the maps they're talking about, or throwing something into a heat map and tweeting that out and adding to the discussion online. That seems to be a really good way for us to get the information out. And then we also launched a blog called Chartland. Kansas City is known as the Heartland, so a little play on words there for Chartland. And we try and update that about once a month or so that focuses on a city topic and shows how data is applied. And it's not always using open data, but certainly when I write, of course, we try and embed open data in that to get people used to seeing the platform, and hopefully they click through and start to explore it.
That's great. You guys also did, I'm just throwing this out there too, the Art of Data, which if anybody hasn't seen that already, we could definitely pass it around. But that was a great event where you invited local artists to use the data in artwork and then had a gallery opening that was hugely successful. So the creativity is always flowing around that Kansas City office.
And I think, Katanya, we have one more question from the GoToWebinar. How do you get more people, it sounds like, how do you get more people engaged in the open data movement sort of within ATF? I know you had talked about the industry days, and then sort of getting the sort of eager internal customers sort of on board as sort of a build up the portfolio, so to speak. But I guess, how else do you see getting more people sort of internally involved?
Well, the low-hanging fruit for us was external, because I can just make data publicly available. There's no restrictions on the accounts or things to that effect. You don't need a user ID and a password to access our files. The next initiative that I'm looking to go back, so I'm in an influx of changes of management and everything else going on right now, so I have to wait for all of this to settle back down and go, oh, by the way, remember we have this program area over there. So I have to reintroduce it again to the new managers. But what I had looked at and had a discussion even with DOJ about is that I can do it with internal users. That says there are some data sets that we are targeting and saying that these would be great candidates, for example, our budget, being able to share it across our different directorates and present that information in a restricted format. But the next portion of it would be internal to DOJ, and that there are other data sets that are available in other organizations under DOJ that we might want to look at and see, if we're sharing and making some of our internal information available that is already being made available to these organizations. It's just, what type of a format are we looking at? So that's an initiative that I want to take. But then the next level would even be within the law enforcement community. Now that's going to be a challenge. So I think I have to still just kind of grow it, and a slow pace is what we are with it right now, to be able to get that buy-in. There are a lot of people who are quietly interested in it for their own particular program areas, and those are going to be the ones that I'm going to leverage as I move it forward.
Great. Well, good. I think that's all of the questions that we've gotten. I hope we didn't miss anybody, but I don't see any others there. If you do have further questions for the group, we are going to keep this conversation going, and there is a group started on the Socrata Datacrats community, which is socrata.influitive.com. If you go to support portal on support.socrata.com, you can find the link there and connect to that community. So we encourage you to do so, and then we will keep the conversation going there. And if you have more questions, we are recording this as well, so you can we'll post that in the Datacrats community as well. If you have anyone else on your team that you would like to share this with, or think would be interested. I'd like to take just a second to thank so much Eric and Catania for your time today and preparation, so that and sharing your stories. I think it's been very helpful, and we really, really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Thanks, everybody, and we will talk to, I'm sure, all of you soon.